and he just like battered it all off, shrugged it off. And before you know it, all the other first years are with him. They've created, this great bond. Just to get better and better. I absolutely loved him, and he was very good at giving us the basics. Some real fundamentals. The way he coached it, I found him inspirational. He's a top guy. Let's face it, if it Danny Welbeck or a Weghorst is like there's just no competition, especially when you add in the feeling and the understanding of it.
McGuinness, welcome.
Thank you, Krista. Yeah, great to come in and have a chat with you.
The first question is, how did football become part of your life?
It's really, I suppose, like a lot of people, their dad or their brother or so on, starts them off. And that, of course, for me, that was my dad. And his sort of rich history in football then brought it all out. I remember very clearly, one of my first memories, I would be about 4, maybe, something like that, kicking a ball with him in the back garden. As it was a front garden, I think, the little house we had. Now he might have been manager of Man United then. He's in a tiny little semi-detached in Timperley, and he was a manager of Man United. But I remember him bending the ball, and I said to him, "How did you make it bend?" And he said, "Well, if you just turn your body to the side a little bit, get the ball out of the side, and you kick on the outside and follow through." He taught me how to bend the ball, and I was like, wow. And after that, I was just against a wall, garage wall or whatever, just fascinated. I always have been since then with, the ball and everything else that came with football. Yeah, you just get into the whole thing. I call it the spirit of football. Once that's inside you, you can, you have different times, say in your career, something where it goes down, but it's always there, ready to be ignited, by special moments and special people, yeah.
You mentioned your dad part of Man United. What was that like growing up in terms of the exposure and living in the area? You said Timperley and everything.
Well, at that point, I was only 4 or 5 while he was manager. I remember some things. I remember going into the ground. I remember going through the big doors at the front, which are still the same. And in those days, the dressing room was out to the left, and it had a very distinctive smell. They had I think they call it 7 oils or something. It's a real concoction of oils that was like a liniment and everything. So when you went in, it was a bit like, not a hospital, but you went out and I remember it was all, the dressing rooms, it was really distinctive, the big bath. I remember going upstairs in the offices, and I think it was still like Sir Matt's office then, but we would sit as kids, me and my sister, and they had like a revolving chain, you spin round on it. So there's little things you remember and being a kid, but obviously I got lots of memories of different places. Because I got the bug, I would always go in during my holidays or whenever I could to training with my dad. It was a bit of an ordeal for me because I was really shy, so I didn't really want to talk to everybody, but I loved it so much. It's one of the lessons for people is like, you might be awkward in a situation, but if you love something, you've got to get through that, that uncomfortable feeling. And because of that, I just learned so much being with him. Going to games, sitting in dressing rooms. Because you were younger and part of the furniture, I would hear all sorts of things you probably shouldn't hear, managers' conversations and coaches and talking about players, or you're in the dressing room, you see what goes on in a dressing room. So I learned the football way of life very early, and probably from a very early age knew I wanted to be a player, but I also knew I wanted to be a coach from a very early age.
Okay.
Growing up with a dad like that, yeah.
So how did that impact you in terms of the environment? What things did you learn then to kind of have a career in football?
Yeah, just most basic things like, John McDonough, who's the head of football at the FA, the technical side, he has a phrase. He said, you've got to know how to behave in the dressing room. You go in a club, you've got to know how to behave, and you've got to know when to get out of the room or when it's not your place to be there and so on. And I learned all that through going in the holidays, listening, talking, I don't need to be here, I'm going to get out of this one. But all the little bits, I loved it all, packing the kit with my dad, packing the boots, cleaning the boots, doing all sorts of things. I mean, we used to go to Bury with my dad. I think the manager, Jim Eiley, he built a new office in the close season. He built the dugouts and everything. I was painting the stands. You were part of it, and that was all just for the chance to have a five-a-side or play head tennis with the apprentices or whatever. So, and I was lucky, I was always going in and he would just join me in, my dad. So I'm a big believer in mixed age groups because I would go in 10, 11, 12 at York and train with the apprentices. Now, some real top players, even at York, that time they had John Byrne, who ended up playing for Brighton. He played and ended up playing for Sunderland in the Cup final, played for Republic of Ireland. He was a top player. And you're learning off them all the time. If you play, I remember doing that at York, you just played behind the stand. You know, one goal was probably underneath, was probably the snack bar, and the other end was a gate or something. So you learn so much by just being immersed in the environment, going to games with him, just watching the games, and he'd say to me, "Well, go on, who's the best player?" And I remember this one vividly was a Newcastle reserves against Aston Villa, and he said, "Who's the best player?" And I said, "Oh, the blonde lad there." And he said, "Oh, he's only young. He was 17." And he said, "Why?" I said, "Well, the way he comes off the ball and he turns, and it was Gary Shaw who ended up winning the European Cup for him." So he's just bit by bit you're learning, and I think that's the way you do learn in football. You learn off the more experienced people. You pick things up, and that was convinced me, of joining in with older people and experiential learning. Yeah.
Did you feel an added pressure because of your dad to play? Did people recognise you as, you know, the Man United?
Yeah, especially when I went to United, like it's always been son of Wilf. You know, I was praying for that day when they'd say, "Oh, here's Wilf, dad of Paul." You know, it's like because that was hard to do because he had some record. He was Man United's youngest manager. He was the youngest manager for England youth when they won in the 60s. They won the Youth and World Cups in the 1960s. He was part of Sir Alf Ramsey's sort of training squad. Well, this is a good story. I put it out the other day. My dad was part of the training squad at Lilleshall for the initial 28 before they picked the World Cup squad.
Okay.
So they trained at Lilleshall, 66. There was him, only four or five of them. There was him, Harold Shepherdson, Les Cocker, and Alf Ramsey at the time. And then they went off on a tour. He picked the squad, and my dad wasn't part of that then. But he did say to my dad, Alf Ramsey said, "When we get to the final, I will call for you." And he did. He called for him, and that my dad's job, which I'm not sure was the safest job for him to do, was to look after all the players' wives the night before the game. They went to a show or something.
Right.
Then he went to the final. He was in the dressing room for the final. And then they went to, I think it was the Royal Lancaster or one of these top hotels for a banquet after the game. But, you know, it's the 1960s. There's all the FA councillors or whoever else. They were all in one room with the players and the players' wives, and my dad was in another room. My dad said it was unbelievable because Alf Ramsey came into the room, got him, brought him in, and made an extra seat, and he sat right next to Sir Alf on the night they won the World Cup. You know, so he was always a part of that, and so he was forever passing stories on about all those sort of things. Yeah.
So how did it happen in terms of your playing career then? So you mentioned you were exposed to these environments, and you grow older and you see potential to play. How did that come about?
Yeah, obviously just playing at school. Schoolmates, we came over from Greece when I was 8, but I hadn't played a lot of football then because I was in an American school, and then the last year I wasn't at school, just had a tutor. There was no English school. So when I came back, I'm probably a bit behind, but I had great classmates, and we played every break, every lunchtime. We played Wembley singles, Wembley pairs, or World Cup people call it. And that was me. I was so engrossed in that. That was mates to school with me. There was a little player called Tom O'Connor. He had the best drag back ever. So he taught me that by doing it to me. Geez, he's good. He had the little black pumps with the elastic on. You remember them? Yeah. He had no laces and all that. And he was a great little player. Some great mates, Pete Turnbull, Mike Serres, different. And I remember, I just loved it. And the competition of it. But you learn so much in Wembley. You know, you've got to beat people, or you've got to be crafty and stand by the far post and get the tap in. You've got to learn so many things about football in a little game like that. So I was immersed in that. And then, well, we moved to York, which obviously not as smaller place, not as hotbed as football, because my dad was the York manager, and he said, "Tell him you play up front." And so the first game, I scored a hat-trick in the first. It was only a little school primary team, but I scored a hat-trick in the first half. And all the kids saw him there and ran over. Wilf, he's the manager. They're all over him, you know. And he said he scored a hat-trick, but I had no boots. I only had trainers on. And he said, well, if he scores another hat-trick, I'll get him some boots. So I was trying like a bear, to score. So I scored the next 3. And this is what I call like the spirit of football. Yeah? So I remember we were in a rented house because he'd only just got there. And he came in. Now he had these boxes of boots just piled up. And he brought them and I was trying them all on. And it was like Kevin Keegan, like Patrick boots, was these 2 stripes at the back, Adidas, Puma. All the different types of boots. I was trying them all on. And for me, that was heaven, because I'd be one of those who like look through Shoot magazine or and see what all the boots they were playing and playing in. So all those little things, so anyway, digressing. I got a great school in York. We played all different sports, which I think is really important. And then we came back to Manchester under 14, 15 year. But I was a little bit late because they didn't know me. But then we had a really good county team. We shared the national championships game at Newcastle. About 6, 7 little lads I played. We played for England that year. The year after I played under 16, I played under 19s. We were national champions. And then I started to play when I went to the 6th form. I didn't go straight into football because my mum said, no, your dad broke his leg. You need something behind you. So then I started to play for United's youth team, going 2 nights a week. And Eric Harrison was the coach. He was like a special, really top coach. And I was hoping to get a chance at United coming to the end of my A-levels. I'll never forget this. There were some moments with Eric you never forget for a few reasons. But we were playing at the Cliff in May. So I was like, will I get a contract? Well, what's happening? And the pitch, then everybody just played on the pitch. First team reserves, they played the A team. So the pitch by the end of the season was just dirt with just grass in the corners. It was dusty. It was hot. And Eric had us playing 6v6, full length, no goalkeepers. You had to be in the 6-yard line to score, which is basically to see who's going to run the most and get back and so on. So I remember someone broke free. They're about 10 yards clear in their half, and I just ran and chased him and did a slide tackle as they got in the box. Ripped all my leg up, and I can remember the feeling now. And he stopped the game and he went, that is what we need. Well, that's a contract, and it was. They got a contract because of it. So he was a massive influence. And then throughout the next, I got a year sort of full time, which was, as I said to you, it was going great. Eric was really good. Had Brian Whitehouse reserve, but I used to play in the reserves. Play with the first team players because if they didn't play in the first team, they played midweek in the reserves. So I was telling you before, we had at the back, played with Paul McGrath, Kevin Moran. It would be Gordon McQueen, who's just died, who's a fantastic guy, really funny guy. Graham Hogg or Billy Garton, local guy lad who was a really good player. Could be any 2 from them. So there's top players. Up front, it was Whiteside, Hughes, or Stapleton, Brazil. Like playing with internationals, And then you had even Arnold Muir and people like that. So it was unbelievable. You got a chance to play. And it was great. But sometimes you couldn't get in because there was too many. And I was thinking, am I going to go to university? What will I do? And this was a key thing. And I like Ron Atkinson in lots of ways. He had great teams. He had lots of good players, but he liked to join in the training. So there was a practice match. We're all ready, set up. I'm ready to play against Brian Robson, England captain. You're ready to play against Norman Whiteside, who's the youngest player in the World Cup. You're on there. It's your dream. And he came down the hill and said to Mick Brown, "Who am I playing then?" And Mick Brown said to me, "Give me your bib. You're the linesman now." And Ron Atkinson played in front of me, and I was absolutely fuming, that he's playing. He can't think much of me. So then I decided, well, I'm going to go to university. And as it happened, they said, well, play part-time, want you to stay, and all this sort of stuff happened. But yeah, that was I think you've always got, as a coach, you've got to make sure you're putting the players sort of first in that sense, yeah.
So you go to university. Did you proceed with playing part-time? What happened?
I did, yeah. It was tough. It's amazing me. I was playing great, and I was due to go to the university on the Saturday. On the Friday, I had my driving test booked, which would have made it so much easier to get back and forth. And
this is Loughborough.
This is at Loughborough, but I was playing really well. Now, I don't know whether it was because I was playing well or I was going to the university or a bit of both. But this was the year United won 10 games in a row. So on that Saturday, they were going for the record. And they picked me to go with the first team. And then in those days, there was only, you were the first reserve. There was 11, the sub, and then me. So if anybody had got injured or ill, or I'd have been in the squad, I'd have been in with going for the record with it, which was crazy. And so because of that, they only told me on the Friday I was going. I had my driving test in the afternoon, so I really should have said, well, I got my driving test, but I was thinking, well, they might say, well, you can't come. So I never told them. And they ended up drawing that game. I go down a day late, but now I've got to get 2 trains to get back and forward, which made it really difficult. And I also, because I was late, I was in digs with 3 Chinese guys who couldn't speak English and a Tanzanian who couldn't. I had to share a room with, which is not, in itself is not a problem. But the fact was, I was getting no contact with anybody socially or anything at university. And then I was driving back and forward 2 times a week, and it just became too much. Yeah. And to be honest, I got really down. And eventually, the end of the season, got let go. Yeah. And I had a short period at Crewe with like David Platt, people like that. They had 2 or 3 really good players there. Jeff Thomas played for England, so I had a short period there. But then I just played at university for a bit.
So obviously, the transition going to university, you get your qualifications, and then you said earlier in the podcast that you wanted to be a coach. Was that the incentive going to university and trying to learn?
Yeah, that was part skills. I still was in a bit. I'd had a downer. Like I said, that spirit of football, it was like low. But then I had some great times playing at university. I had some really good players with me, and you lift it up. You think, oh, I can maybe still do it. But in the meantime, I'd got my prelim coaching, and I'd had a summer in the States with some of my mates coaching. Yeah. So I'd started to get the bug for it. Funnily enough, the first actual team I coached was a girls' team under 15, 16. They got you going, and I come back, and I was due to go back out there. And my mates who did go out there, they stayed. They built up a multi-million-dollar company, and they've been there ever since. But this is like another how life like strokes a look. I was saying to doing a chat with the careers thing with some kids recently from school, and say, well, you just got to get in the room. If you get in the room, like I said, I got in the room with my dad, in the coach's room, in the dressing room with the first team players, in a chance to play with the apprentices. You get in there, it gives you a chance in football. And that I just got in the right room again at the right time. I was at Easter. I thought, I'll just go back and see Eric and Brian White. I'll just see how they're doing now. Sir Alex had come now, and they weren't doing great, the first team. Yeah. In fact, they had a lot of young players gone in the first team, like Russell Beardsmore, Daniel Graham. They'd had to go because they were struggling with injuries. So I just turned up and said to Eric and Brian, oh, how are you doing? They said, what are you doing? What are you doing now? I said, well, I'm still playing, but I'm going to go coaching. They said, you could have played last night at Main Road. We're really struggling for players in the reserves because the younger ones have gone up. We need some older ones. I was about 23 then. And they said, can you play next week? I said, yeah. So the last bit of my university bit, while I was studying for exams and stuff, I played 8 games for the reserve team. Now, I'm going to tell you how bad it was. I think it was the year Coventry won the FA Cup. Houchin scored with a diving header. And I played in the last game of the season for the Central League, and if they didn't win it, they got relegated. But they played Brian McClare, Steve Bruce, Gordon Strachan, and they played about 4 of Clayton Blackmore. They played about, and I played, to make sure they didn't go down. But the pitch was terrible at Old Trafford and everything. So on the back of that, I was waiting because I'd agreed to go to this coaching thing, and then got a phone call. Can you come and see Sir Alex? So came in and he explained, and this is true. He's done that all his career. He said, it's important to have every age group filled in your club, because once one moves up, you need the next one to come in, and he always did that. Whenever I went in his office years later when I was coaching, he'd just pull open a drawer, and he had just a normal pad, like rolled over, and he'd go, well, he's here, he's on this money, he's this, but we've got a gap here, we can't have a gap. And he liked to fill, so I filled that. He said, I want you to come in and be an older head, be in captain reserves for a year or so, while we've got these young ones. And I probably played with Alan Tong that you talked about before, and so on. And so that idea of mixed age groups, again, worked in my favour because I could talk at that stage. And he probably saw from my talking there, I did a year, and then Darren was coming in the reserve team, other people were in. So then he sort of faded off, and I was going to go. But as it was sort of releasing me to say, thanks for what you've done, but he said, go and get your coaching badge, your A license, your full badge, because you've got a future in that as well. So he'd obviously thought ahead with it a little bit, and that was in stark contrast to when I left the last time. Nobody really. There was me and Alan McLaughlin who told us in the showers, coming out of the shower, "Oh, we're going to release you," And Alan played in the World Cup and was £1 million player, I think, at one point. But yeah, that was the advice, and that's what he was brilliant at. That if you let you down, let go, he was giving you advice. Sir Alex. And then I had a year at Chester, which really was very difficult for me because I couldn't get in the team. Well, they played the type of football that was completely foreign to me, Yeah. And the manager was an experienced. He was an incredible character. But I learned a lot there, but I didn't play a lot. And then in the summer of that year, Sir Alex phoned me again, and he knew I'd done the coaching badge, but he said, I've got a job part-time, which is now what they do, player care. It was like education and welfare and so on, looking after the digs. And that sort of got me in again. And I was thinking I was going to go and play, but what it did is it got me in the coach's room. And I used to go I didn't have to be there all the time, but I used to just go sit in there and listen, because you had Brian Kidd, Nobby Stiles, Eric Harrison, Jim Ryan, Pop Robson. And I used to and it was like such a learning for me just listening to them. And maybe because I'd just been in there that much, when a job came in the sense to run the Centre of Excellence, he gave me the job, which was like, it wasn't crazy really, because I had no experience,
Is there anyone that stands out during that process in terms of your development? You mentioned that the people that you associated with and being in the room, was there anyone that helped you in terms of maybe either mentor or that off mode?
Well, so many, like my dad, obviously, I'd go to games, told this story a few times, you go to games and you Stockport County, and you'd be sat there and he'd go, number 6, he's going to get a yellow card. And he'd seen he'd lost his head or something had happened and get a yellow card, and then he'd go, they're that far on top, they're going to concede in a minute. What's he talking about? And they would, they'd someone who'd push out of position, they'd push up too much, and suddenly go, score anything. These little, you get little things.
Instinctive.
Yeah, you just see all these little small things, you'd get. And being in the room with my dad, so competitive, and it was hard, but it was preparing you for football. So being in the room on our drive, you could say that's in the room with him playing head tennis, 14. So that's basically head in football volley, and we used to play table tennis rules, first 21, 5 serves. He would beat me 21-0, 21-0, 21-0, and I'd be absolutely raging. And he would sledge me, and he would cheat, So he wouldn't give you 1 point. It's near the line. No, chalk dust. It's in, and he would go, match point. It's 20-0. And he's like making you nervous on match point. I'd be fuming. You go, oh, your left foot's not so good, is it? And all of these things, and you think, but that was like the hard school he'd grown up with, sledging each other, and so you got all that sort of the real bit of football in that sense. I've had so many good influences. There was a guy called Mike Holliday who was the coach at Loughborough, so I had professional football, and in the first game at Loughborough, he used to stand on the bank there. He never said anything, and this was everybody shouted, witness, referee, that he used to have a big cigarette on. It'd be like Caesar Minotti, and he'd come down at half time and he'd just say 2 or 3 things, and you'd been so used to somebody coming in to get a bollocking, and then at the end of the game, because we were students as well, he'd go, right, just check the notice board and fill in a time. I'll put some times down, fill in a time, and just come and see me in my office. And you'd go and chat to him for half an hour, and he'd be dead calm, and probably a lot more like people are doing that more now with some of the stuff they do. But that was like, never seen anything like that. So that was a big influence on me. That's how I I coached. I did shout on at the side, but I don't think you should be telling people what to do, especially on the ball. All the time. I think Arsene Wenger said, "I never tell someone to do it on the ball. You haven't got it's their perception at that time." So he was a big influence. There was a guy as well who did the rugby at Loughborough. So you did football or rugby as your main sports. You did all the other sports, cricket and everything, but your two main. So you choose one in your first year, another one in your second year. Now everybody, apart from the rugby players did rugby in the first year. Now nobody wanted to do rugby with the rugby players for good reason, So all the other sports, you've got footballers, hockey players, gymnasts, swimmers, everybody's in the football. And then the second year, we did the rugby, and then we switched, right? And the guy taking the rugby was a guy called Jim Reed, I would recommend anybody get his books, whatever sport, ball sports, football. His books are fantastic. And he was world renowned. He'd been the Japanese national coach. He played in British Lions. To me, he was an inspirational guy. I absolutely loved him, and he was very good at giving us the basics, some real fundamentals. The way he coached it, I found him inspirational. He's a top guy, and I've lost him. Eric Harrison, being in the room with Eric Harrison, his coaching was so clear. He was a bit scary at times for everybody, but his coaching was so clear. He did a session in the mornings. The class and I had two, we had it, where you had to look over your shoulder before you came to receive the ball. As the ball came, you looked over your shoulder again. So he was teaching scanning before anybody had heard of it, really. And his coaching was the clarity of it. Everything he did in training, he thought, I've seen that. When he came to the match, he thought, I've seen that in training. That's what he's, to me, that's coaching. He was top. There's a lot of, Jim Ryan was a great influence on me in the room with Jim Ryan at Man United. Very good on different thinking, creative thinking, combination play. I've learned so much from him. I've been lucky. Graham Carrick, who's Michael Carrick's brother, who he played at West Ham as well as young player, retired with injuries, now youth coach at Newcastle, and he worked with me in the FA, and he said, but you've had football privilege. And I had really, growing up with my dad, Bobby Charlton's coming over in the house, and I played with Bobby Charlton in charity games. I played when I was 15, 16. It's all about getting in the room. I played with World Cup winners, European Cup winners, League Cup winners, Man United players, and I played with and against Bell, Lee, Summerby, Doyle, all the City guys as well. So just to be on the same pitch as them. And Bobby was just majestic, either shoot from 25, 30 yards. But like a bit more like gentleman Bobby, more aggressive, more competitive than people would ever think. He's not going to win the World Cup and all that without being. If you didn't give him the ball, he'd give it. And I'd known him for years. Like, give me the ball. Yeah.
So, Centre of Excellence, you get the opportunity at Man United. From that experience, is there anything that stands out in terms of player development? Is there anything that you think are the key credentials to make it as a professional, or make a career within the game? Is there anything that stands out in terms of your experiences at that period of time?
Yeah, look, like I say, you got to have this spirit of football inside you, and that sort of that drives you. They're all determined. These guys are all determined. You know what I mean? Yeah, I'll be probably a bit obsessed, but determined. So he's all in the class of '92 and all them. Gary Neville, one of the most determined guys you could ever meet, and the learners. He wasn't as skillful as the rest. But he made himself to play. He used to go out and kick a ball against the wall, and the second years at that time, he give him a stick. Whenever he came through the room, busy, you're busy. You try to be, creeping with the coaches. And he just battered it all off, shrugged it off. And before you know it, all the other first years are with him. They've created, this great bond, just to get better and better. They used to come, they would train. I think they went to college maybe Monday in the morning or so afternoon or something, or all day on a Thursday. But they would come. It'd be Ben Thornley, the ones who were a bit more local. I mean, Beckham lived just around the corner from the cliff, so we'd be taking the train, Eric Wood, 15, 16s on an evening train, Monday, Thursday, whatever. They'd come as well. So they'd train in the morning, train in the evening, train in the afternoon, train in the evening as well. Or they might have college on a Thursday, but they didn't want the day off, so they come and train. So imagine that again, the mixed age group having 16s, but they're in who's a standard above. It just raises it again. So that really convinces me about that. So that, yeah, and the practice ethic and the quality of the practice. You know, those players, you know, Beckham, the quality of it. Funnily enough, you go around different clubs and you see some good stuff. And I see one club, they do really a lot of technical work, and they have kicking against the boards. They have some boards around the pitch every time. And I was there, and I said to the kid, "As this kid, what you know, where are you aiming for?" And he said, "The boards." And I said, "Whereabouts on the boards?" And he's the middle, you know. I said, "Oh no, you've got to be more exact than that. Let's aim for the crack between the two boards now. Let's have a game." Now there you've increased the competition, but you've also given a target. If you have the target, you know, just kicking it at the goal, or then you know, if you pull it to the left, then you think, oh, you can adjust. Oh, did I swing round too much? Did I fade it? Did I hit through the middle? So you must have a target and an aim. So this is going back to being in the room when I was a kid, probably about 15. Used to go a lot with my dad to games all over, but we used to go on a Friday night to Stockport because they played a lot of Friday night games because didn't want to clash with City United on a Saturday. Right. So at half time, my dad's talking to a load of coaches or managers, scouts, and I'm just stood watching. And this guy turned to me. I didn't know who he was at the time, but it turns out he was a legend player, 40s, 50s for, even the 30s for Man City, a guy called Peter Doherty. He'd been the manager of Doncaster, the manager of Northern Ireland, the World Cup, 58. He's a legend. I didn't know that at the time. But he was really nice. He turned to me and he went, "All right, son." He said, "Do you want to be a player?" And I said, yeah, I really want to be a player, yeah. He said, "I'll give you one bit of advice." I never forgot what he said. He said, "Never kick a ball aimlessly." And you might think, oh, well, obviously, yeah, but there's so many people who kick it aimlessly. And what I mean aimlessly, be like, someone will pass it to you, but they need to pass it 2 yards in front. You know, they need to pass it to your right foot, your left foot. It's got to be the exact right thing to give you the best opportunity. And that is a mantra. Then, if you have that as a player, and all them Beckham and all them, they had that. You know, so what stands out? If the best players have that, they give you the perfect pass. And I think the best one was Cantona. You just play the ball wide, and Dennis Irwin cross it first time. He's telling you what to do with his pass. So that's one of the most key things you can have as a player. And it really stuck with me. Every practice session I did, I was already doing it, but it made bigger emphasis. You know, it's obvious, isn't it? Never kick a ball aimlessly. And funnily enough, I've just done some match analysis for UEFA on the under-16, under-19 championships in Malta. And you get a load of stats. The statistics, they give you the stats and so on. And a couple of games where some of the teams were great. Spain, Portugal, Italy were fantastic. They're great, really top class. Some of the others a little bit lower, you know. And I got some stats in and said, oh, they're quite equal here on the accuracy of passes. And I'm thinking, this team's not been that accurate on the passes. You're taking an accurate pass as he got it. But he might have had to go back a yard to get that ball, or the ball was bouncing instead of smooth. So it's the difference between the top players, the exact place they put it, you know, and their appreciation of what the other player needs. So, yeah, there's a whole lot of things, but there's just some of them, yeah, that would be key.
You mentioned that the players, such as Gary Neville, were keen to learn and educate themselves, be in the room where they can learn off of us. You kind of emphasised it a little bit in terms of what you said, but how did you develop yourself during that period at Man United? How did you become a better coach? How did you become a better person? Yeah, a mentor, a role model. Is there anything you did to develop yourself?
Yeah, a lot of it's trial and error, your mistakes, so on. But yeah, I said, look, you get in the room with these top people. So I was with top people. They were absolutely top people. And the first thing is when you know you don't know what they know, the most important thing is to watch and listen. If you're talking all the time, you can't listen and watch. So I was very respectful of that, thinking, well, I don't know. Now, as you get a bit, then you start to ask some questions and so on. And then we'll have a go. Trial and error and have a go. It's simple, really, isn't it? So I remember some of my first sessions at the cliff. So we didn't have a lot, it was a good size indoor area, but not always for the numbers we had big enough. So I remember trying to do an overlap, teach overlaps. Oh, could I get this to work? I couldn't get it to work. The fullbacks, the winger's marked by the fullback. He comes off and the fullback comes with him, so he couldn't turn. And so I remember going in the next day to Eric Harrison, and this is, you get really thunderbolt moments sometimes. Constant, some things that are so simple, but that's what it is. So I said to Eric about it, what was it? He said, well, it's a key thing, key principle. Unless the guy's turned and facing forward, you can't really overlap him. Because he's got his back to goal, you go past him, you might lose it. And so it's such a simple, it's a rule of thumb. It's not always exactly like that, because he might backheel it, or he might, but there you got a simple rule of thumb. I remember we were one of the first times, first we had no teams. There weren't any teams allowed. You had maybe an under-16 schoolboy team, but slowly you were allowed to have more teams with a sense of excellence. So we built up the teams and the coaches. It went from 15s to 14s, and eventually went down to the young ones, 9s, 10s. I remember we were trying to be, play out from the back and so on. And the other teams were just crowding us, and they were stopping it. And I remember going in and sort of, almost on a Monday, sort of moaning about it. And Brian Kidd used to sit in the corner, sometimes lean back on his chair, and he could see down the corridor, see all the players and everybody coming past. So he was aware of everything. And I remember moaning, sort of chuntering about this, And I remember him saying, well, what would you do if you're in the first team? They're pressing you at the back, what have you. He said, you'd get the goalkeepers, kick it to the centre forward, wouldn't you? Kick it over them. They're all pressed. Just kick it over them. And that's what Man City do, don't they? They entice everybody in, and then Edison hits one. He's made goals, hasn't he, for Aguero or whoever else in the past. That's you sometimes go, oh yeah, that's a game. It's obvious. So you so many times, but that would be the process for me. Other people are different. Some people just jump in there. I've always been one to sit back, have a look at it first, let me assess it, see. But there's so many things you learn from through being in the same room. People like that, like Sir Alex. I was in a privilege. I was in the room with him, with all the coaches, but then I would be with him in the room before games where we brought prospective players in with the parents to speak to them. So you're learning the way he speaks to them, the way he stresses what the club's got to offer, but also the sacrifice that's needed, and how we look after the family. And he basically, he was doing this from 2:00 to 2:30 before a match. And then he'd go at 2:30, he'd go, oh, I better go and give the team talk. And he'd go, now he already gives a team talk an hour or so, but he's filling that time, because for a coach, a manager, that's the worst time, an hour before the match. You can't do anything particularly. So, but he would do that. And the parents, it's incredible. And it was incredible. I was like that every time it happened. I was like, wow, I can't believe this. But what it meant was, they knew the manager meant he wanted them so much, and he was, so that for sure he might be firm with them later or whatever, but they knew they belonged to something and they had a chance, and of course, again, lots of good things about Ron Atkinson, but imagine the contrast between Ron Atkinson having a game and I'm on the side, and the manager's talking to these parents and saying, I'm going to look after you. And he did. He would know all the parents' names and so on. So,
what was your relationship like with Sir Alex?
It was fantastic. Obviously, you were scary. Those first few years that you saw in action sometimes, that hairdryer, and you think, Jesus, I don't want that. You know what I mean? It's like, but the main thing was, like, he'd given me such a chance as a young age, and like he said it with the class of '92, if you give them a chance, young people, they repay you so much more, because you think, this guy's given me the opportunity, and that's how I was always afraid of letting him down. So it made me work that much harder. And then I saw how hard he worked, or I listened to what he did, and then I'd copy that and I'd repeat that with parents and so on. So you were learning so many things. And he was so, like, for such a guy to be like, yeah, he's so strong. He was so caring, and he was able to box things off from the first team to the youth team to parents to this to that. So one of the ones I always remember is they'd won the FA Cup, and then the year after they won in Rotterdam, they won the Cup Winners' Cup, but he's still not won the league, and he's about 6 years in now. And so the pressure's still on massively. And the year they won the league for the first time in 20-odd years, After 3 games, I think they had 1 point. They lost, I think, to Everton. They lost to someone else. So I'm outside the dressing room. He shouts at me, "Hey, get me the number for Paul Gibson, who was a goalkeeper. He was in the under 16, 17, and he'd had and he'd been in a tournament, and the striker had put his studs in his face, basically, knocked his nose back, and the hospital was saying, we're not sure if he can play again and all that." 15 minutes after the end of that game, and they're in the bottom 3, he's able to put that to one side, and he phoned the boy in the hospital with the parents. And afterwards, they were like, I thought someone taking a mickey at first, but like, he was able to do that and touch everybody in that way, And another big one was when I first started. I was in charge of the Centre of Excellence. Then you had to organise trials, which trials for players coming from all over, and the scouts were in, from all over UK and so Ireland. And it was tough because I had to organise the games in the afternoon because he wanted to watch the training for the first team and then watch that as well. And then afterwards he would have a meeting with all the scouts and what do they think. And he would say to them, well, go on, you tell me, do you want him back because he's your player? He's not done so well this time. You give them that sort of responsibility and great, the trust. And then at the end of the week, and I'd sort of kept my head down because my first week I want this to go well. I've got to pick the teams, I've got to do the training, I've got to organise the games, I've got to sort the minibus, I've got to do all these things, the kit and everything. And some of the scouts were a lot older than me. In fact, when I'd been a player, they were scouts, and I was a bit, I don't know, all of them, but like respectful. So I probably didn't speak to them that much that week. So he pulled me in his office on the Monday and he said, right, sit down. I've got some advice for you here now. And he says, some of the scouts think you're arrogant. You've not spoken to them all week. I was like, no, I was just that busy. I was keeping my head down. And he said, no, what you got to remember is these people, like, when they come here, they've been working sun, rain, snow, going to these people, how they're working like hell. When they come here, you need to make them feel valued, make them feel like they're part of it, maybe talk to them and get to know them about it. And it's like, that was another big, that's all he does with everyone. And he did. He did it with the staff, with the kit men, with the laundry ladies, with whoever came. That's how they felt, Yeah. And what a massive skill to have,
Talk to me about the culture then. So you kind of elaborated it on your point then in terms of leadership and management and how that's kind of filtered down in other areas. What made Man United successful? What was the culture like, and what made you develop players to achieve great things and compete at international tournaments and have careers? Obviously we see it from a glamorous perspective in terms of Man United, but I'm sure there's players that have come through the system that have made it in with other teams. What do you think that was that enabled that to proceed?
Yeah, well, it's like now you've got academies with lots of different people, and they all come from different and so on, and a complex sort of system. If you're not careful, it's too complex. You can't communicate well, or so on. But obviously, without doubt, the thing that tied it together was that one man, that the power he had in terms of his strength, the character, his work ethic, but this ability to make people want to work for him and feel part of it, feel like you belong to something special. You all felt connected. Now, the other thing was it also grew. It wasn't too complex. It grew sort of organically. Now you've got like explosion of staff in places, you all moving around, 15, 20 staff with background for everywhere. And they started with maybe about 8 of us. And then it slowly grew. So it grew. And also, if you have complex system and everybody's got a different background, you need somehow to pull them together. And we had a lot of people who'd been through the United Youth system. So you had myself, you had Jim Ryan, you had John Cook, you had Tony Whelan, then you'd have Brian McClare. You had a lot of people who had a lot of feeling for it. And there was sort of core understated fact of the way United played. It was skill is king. You've got to play skillful attacking football, and that was sort of an unwritten rule all the way through, yeah.
So talk to me about the journey towards the latter end of Man United and kind of coming into this more educational role. How did that come about and how did that happen? And how did it develop you, more importantly?
Yeah, I suppose after I've been there for so long, obviously there were changes. The manager changed. There was going to be change. And at the same time, there was new stuff from the EPP came in and lots of things. And the people who came in, clearly just wanted to make some changes and get different people in.
Was this when Sir Alex Ferguson retires?
Yeah, after that. Yeah. It was... but I don't think it was the manager so much. It was behind the scenes. Like, it was setting a new... I think whichever terms you've got to advance, you've got to move on, haven't you? You've got to move on. So yeah, that was the time then when I left and I went to the FA, and I thought it was the right thing to do, because you just go to... I've been at one club all that time. You're good at good experience, so on, but it's the context. You go to everybody's got a different context, so you go to just one more club. So it was good to go to the FA, where you saw a range of clubs and a range of people who were coming on the courses. And of course, I got to meet and work with some really experienced coach educators from the FA who, I learned a lot from as well, So yeah, it's a really valuable period, It was funny, I'd been at United for, all those years. There's a guy called John Allpress, who'd been at the FA for a long time. And I'd been in the FA for 2 or 3 months, and I'd already got a commitment to do a talk, a presentation and coaching demo in Norway. And John was on this as well. So while we were there, he was chatting to me. He'd been at the FA for a long time, and he said to me, well, how are you finding it? He said, there's lots of good, interesting stuff. I said, but they use some words sometimes we wouldn't have used in terms of football. So someone said, about context and stuff. And I said, I wouldn't have used that. And John he was really kind to me. He went, I see. So I think it's quite an important word, though, And now, having seen all the different contexts, different places, I would say that's one of the most important things you need to know about. You've got to be able to adapt what you do to the context of wherever you're going. You've got to read their culture. You've got to, and that's been a really important learning thing. Yeah.
Just on your reflection on Man United, and you said that you were there for one club and a period of time. I'll be careful with how I word this, but was there anyone at the club in terms of players that you thought could have really made a great career but didn't necessarily fulfill the potential that they had?
You get so full enough. You've got and this is because he's had an unbelievable career, but I don't think they should have got rid of Johnny Evans. No, he's just playing a game, hasn't he, again? But in that time, I don't think they've had a better player. The ones that have replaced him, I don't think have been better. And he already had that Man United feeling, the experience, and so on. So I think he could have been a core leader in that sense, because of the guy he is as well. So I think there was a mistake. Other ones, I might be here could easily be being biased or over emotional in a sense, because I've seen the lad grow for so long. But he's such a useful player, Danny Welbeck. We went on, he played for England, did really well. Arsenal, still doing well at Brighton. And if it wasn't for his injuries, I think he'd have been a key player. Maybe not the superstar all the time, but playing different positions, know the club. So that bit of people knowing the club, growing up there, is important to have enough of them about. And, he was a really top player. Probably not the out-and-out goal scorer. But then again, I look at some of the players they've had since, and I think, come on, some of them, let's face it, I fit Danny Welbeck or a Weghorst is there's just no competition, especially when you add in the feeling and the understanding of it. So people like that, who have made big careers, but sometimes you think, I don't know why they let them go, because I'm not sure who they brought in was better, Yeah.
In terms of the transition, you mentioned class of 92, and you mentioned them going into the first team, and I'm sure Centre of Excellence your role is to aid the first team. If you think about the class of 92 in terms of their longevity and playing for such a long period of time, from a young age all the way through, what do you think enabled them to have such a long career? You mentioned keeping fit with Danny Welbeck, but is there anything that stands out in terms of credentials or mindset or performance-wise that was important for the longevity of footballers? Because you see a lot of players reach their 30s. Gareth Bale, for example, 32. They're fatigued and tired from the pressures of playing at such a big football club, and there are other examples of that. Is there anything that stands out in terms of why there is a persistence each year to continually compete and win at the top level? Ryan Giggs is a prime example of that.
Yeah, and Beckham, Beckham didn't just go to United. He went to Real Madrid. He went to AC Milan. He went to Paris Saint-Germain. Beckham would come and practice, like I said, afterwards. I remember him coming after he'd played in the first team, just like to come down and like see us in the evening. He just come in with a tracksuit on and he starts playing with the lads. He's got his trainers on and tracksuit. He starts playing, and it was funny because they were playing about eight aside across the gym, which is about 50 yards around. So they're all playing little short passes if it's 5 aside. He got it, bang, hit the centre forward, bang. Now what do you think happened? They all started doing it. Because it's him, they all start copying it. And one was Alex Bruce. I remember it. He was in there. Phil Barzay, Alex Bruce hit the long ball,
Yeah.
And so there's the impact he had. I remember one time, he must have just been bored. He wanted a game of football. But this is still, I think he's in the first team. He drove to Littleton Road, which was basically no security there, nothing. And I had a group of under 14s. And we played 4 aside. He's on one team, I'm on the other, and we played across the penalty area. He's just playing for the fun. He loves football. So you've got that much love of football, then that drives you. It gets you to the bad times and so on, but to get better and better and better. And all of them. But the other thing of like, how did they succeed? It's also they're succeeding as a group. So they play together that much, you know what they're going to do. Gary Neville and Beckham, they know what to do. I remember I was sat in the director's box there once, and an American guy went, he goes, are these set moves? I said, no, they just know each other that well. They can, remember York and Cole were playing it to them, but all of them, they knew each other that well. And that to me, people don't push enough the homegrown thing.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, it's a complex system. It's about the connections between players. And, people, they buy players. They think, we'll buy him, we'll buy this, we'll just slot in and be a team. And before you know it, they've sacked the manager. Now the training changes, whole different. The language changes. Now he brings in 2-3 players. It's so difficult to connect unless you have time together. And they all made each other better.
Yeah,
Where
do you see the game going, Paul, in terms of the development of new technologies, advancement in sports science and other areas? Where do you think the game will go? In terms of developing players and systems and ways of playing. You mentioned playing out from the back and the advancement of tactics, etc. Do you think there'll be a change in the future in terms of how the game is played?
Yeah, it's always evolving, isn't it? It's always evolving. We've seen it's evolved a lot with the influence of Guardiola and so on. At the moment, there's a guy called Jamie Hamilton writing some really good stuff actually about the way, is it Diniz? He's just become the Brazil manager. He was a Fluminense, and he's playing a more old-style Brazilian football. And there's a lot of people who are more disciples of the positional stuff, where they definitely get stock patterns, and they're there. And this over on this side is we play. It's not off the cuff, but they're playing in tighter areas, little combinations, and so on. And I think you need both, because if the team's now getting so organised, they've got so much and match analysis, and so if they're all organised, how do you beat that? You've got to disorganise them. So if part of that is you don't know quite what you're going to do next, because we're playing now, combinations and disguise and so on, then they won't know either. And being good in small spaces and so on, I think that's the next step really. I said it for quite a bit of time. I worked with some of the England teams. I said, well, I think you need to get the connections between the players so that like he's done an unbelievable job, Gareth Southgate. He's took them from a splintered squad, maybe from different club factions, and to bring them all together, to bring the press round, to get the feeling for the nation, to get them really good. They're like pretty much like a club team, the way they seem, both on and off the field. I think some of the defending in the World Cup was brilliant together, and then counter-attacking. And I think he knows in the next bit to win and take the next step again is to have more control and take control at the right moments to change the speed and the combinations and so on. So for English football, I think that's one of the key things, that those skills to combine and be able to interact with people and read the connections between them. Because if you're not careful, you do all patterns without opposition, but the whole game is reading the opposition and outwitting them.
Okay.
So we need players who are skilled at that, both off the ball in terms of the positional play and so on, but also on the ball, so that they can combine together in a really clever way. Yeah.
So that's few questions. What I normally do with my guests is I get them to either look back, look forward, and what I'm going to get you to do is maybe look back on your career. If there was anything that you could have changed, what would it have been?
Yeah, playing for Man United England, probably. You know, I know this is funny, but even last World, this is when I talk about the spirit of football. So this is how I sort of still am, 50 odd now. But you know, I'm watching the World Cup and the squad there, and for some reason I was talking to John McDermott, who's a technical director, who's there, and I was talking to him, and I sent him a text and I said, just tell Gareth I can't believe he's not for this squad. And it's like, I've still got that in me, you know, like I'm sure I could be playing, you know. So it's that, yeah, you still got that schoolboyish dream, and I think that's the most important thing to keep, you know, and to pass on. You say that to me, you're really passionate in your coaching. It's like, why wouldn't you be? You know, we want to try and pass that on. I think, yeah, I like that phrase. Someone said it was from Einstein. I don't know. It's better to be a man of value than success, because success can be short-lived. You have it, it's gone. Whereas value, you can add to it, and it adds on. It can even people after they've died, there's a ripple effect. You know, so we're talking about Eric Harrison, and I'm still using his stuff now, and somebody else after me will still use it, and so on. So they're still having a big effect on people. Yeah.
No passion, no point.
Yeah, there's that, and really affecting people, I think, is important with ideas and stuff. Yeah, Jim Ryan has affected me a lot in my career, and thinking differently, having the courage to think differently, not just follow the crowd. And as a coach, I think it's important, because it's easy, not easy, but it's quite hard to think differently, because what you're actually doing is you're taking your association away with all the social people you know and everybody. But sometimes you have to say, well, no, I'm not doing it that way. You know, I don't think that's the right way. And I think that's it's hard for you young coaches to do that, you know, because to sort of have a different opinion, you need to have pretty good knowledge about and experience of certain things, you know.
What legacy do you want to leave behind in the football world?
Oh, probably just that. I said that you hope that you've passed on some passion and something else for someone else to then do the same. Yeah.
Where can listeners or viewers find you then, Paul? There might be people watching this or listening to this podcast that are inspired. Are you on any?
I go on Twitter, which I never thought I would be. You know, years ago I'd have been like, no, don't do that, lads. You know, but then I was out of work and my wife said, well, you should get on it and see what's going on. I to be fair, I found lots of good people on it. You know, you find lots of people good, just interesting to educate yourself.
Yeah.
You can follow who you want, can't you? So just do that. So you can find me on Twitter. If I'm not banned, they kicked me off because I put too many films on of different games. So I had a Mitrovic type ban, but I think hopefully. Yeah, the people say they enjoyed some of the stuff you put on that's a bit different, make them think differently. Yeah.
And what kind of things do you put on there? Is it football coaching, education?
Little bits of that. because I've done quite a lot on this, on the individual and the observation of it and what's absolutely happening in interaction. So why did the fullback lose his man, or what was the footwork like, or that sort of thing. And then also, how do we connect together? So yeah, I think there's this sort of three parts to the game. You look at there's a lot of coverage on 5-3-2 against 4-3-3, and it's a high press. So that is good. It's vital. And then you can zoom in, down again, and go, oh, look at this unit. It might be the vertical unit down the wing, the winger connected with the midfield player and the fullback, or it might be 3 midfield players against 2, or how do I connect with you? And then you look about the individual. So there's those different layers, which I find interesting. I think they're important for coaches to be able to do all three, because you might say, oh yeah, that's the tactic here that we need to do, but that might be dependent on, just a technical thing. So it's almost like taking a biopsy. Oh, well, yeah, that's what happened. Yeah, but this could be the cause. So big lesson I had was Jim Ryan. We were playing, he was like the director of the youth, and I was under-18 coach. We played Blackburn Rovers away, under-18s. They were really pressing us and making it difficult for us. We couldn't get out. It was a struggle in the first half. So I came up with the tactical solution. I did the team talk, the under-18 coach, right, and the tactics now, because they're pressing us, we've got to play over them, over the top, so they've always got to run, or we might play round them. You could be disguised and play some through them, but the tactics, we can't get caught here. And Jim reduced it to talking to just one player. There was a lad called Connor McCormack, who was a good little midfield player, combative, won the ball, played it simple. And Connor was playing at right back this game. He was helping out because we were at that position. And but he was doing the same things he would do in midfield. He just control it, try and play here. And Jim said to him, no, you know, it's not like midfield where you have to stop it and play it quick there. He said, you need to now, instead of stopping in front of you, you need to take the ball out to the side. Because now the technique for you is to maybe bend one down the line, or hit a straight one over the top. Or from this position, you might be able to reverse it and go the other way. Or you might play the winger here. But that's now, so Jim helped him solve a tactical problem by a small technical thing about where he controlled the ball to, which meant his approach could come from side on, and he could get his foot under it and bend it rather than being straight on. So I think that's interesting for coaches to be able to see all those layers.
So if we give you a follow on Twitter, we'll find out a little bit more in terms of that. Yeah. Paul, from my own personal perspective, I just want to thank you for coming in. Obviously, you've come all the way from Altrincham into Manchester City Centre. Your story's inspirational in terms of your career within playing, educating yourself at Loughborough, and then obviously working with world-class people. Just want to thank you, and cheers for today's conversation.
No, thanks a lot. I've enjoyed it. Thanks, Krista. Yeah.